I'm sitting here with Matthew Small, who's standing for Hamilton City Council elections 2019 on the West Wall.
Yes.
The side I used to live on.
Vote small, think big.
Yeah, vote small, think big. Now, first of all, we'll start with, because we'll probably discuss a few things, but first of all, start with essentially, why should people vote for you?
I believe that the four key areas that I'm standing on is something that council needs around the council table.
Okay.
And that's around housing.
Yep.
So the supply of housing has dried up. People are moving to Hamilton, and I think it's great, but the demand has increased rents by, on average, $30 in the past year in Hamilton.
And the demand for housing is just going to keep on going. It's not something that's going to stagnate.
Well, it depends whether Aucklanders keep on moving here. So,
yeah, I think Hamilton's now hit the point where our population is going to keep growing. It's not. I don't think it's ever going to stagnate. Places like Tikawiti, from where I come from, for instance, they've pretty much stagnated around the same population for the last 20 years or more. Hamilton has consistently kept growing.
I just don't know whether the 40 people on a bus, that's what the councillors and the commentators are saying now, whether that's going to stay that number.
Yeah. It may go up and down, but we're never going to have a mass exodus of Hamilton.
Yeah. So that's why council definitely have a role to play in partnership with central government, local government, community organisations and developers to work together to increase the supply of housing faster. So that's cutting red tape, that's changing planning rules, that's working with central government around having an alternative to special housing areas. Former Housing Minister Phil Twyford said they're stopping in October. He said they're not working, which is fair enough. Central government now have to come up with an alternative to special housing units. Which is something definitely I'm passionate about.
And I think we also need to acknowledge that no matter how much you put up in the way of housing, it needs to be infill, it needs to be multi-units to a piece of land, and we've got to acknowledge that there's going to be a lot more people renting. Yes, it would be nice if people could afford to buy homes, but the way things are going, there's going to be a lot more people renting flats or apartments or whatever.
Yep. So yes, I agree with infill housing, and it's good that houses are going to be built, infill housing. But I do agree with Peacock, but we need to do it right.
Yeah.
We need to make sure we've got the right type of housing, and we're not got sections with $1 million homes.
Yeah.
So it's important that we have houses, we have social housing in the area, we have apartments, infill housing getting built straight away.
Yeah.
And it's important that we have community facilities at the same time. So that's green space, parks.
Essentially, we need a balance. Like someone else said, we need a balance between the infill housing and the expanding the actual boundaries. We need a balance between that. We need it to be balanced slightly more in favour of the infill, because a compact city means we can justify a lot more things. A different roading system, different bus system, more happening in the centre of town. You look at cities overseas, once there was a lot of housing close into the city, we started to have more foot traffic in the city and less car traffic.
So council definitely have a role to play, and working with developers to give an incentive to build in this CBD, to build. This is like a long-term thing, and central government will have to do a lot of changes, and that's if we look outside the square and we use state houses, so a lot of them are no longer fit for purpose.
Yeah.
And I remember doing a video with you around the old Gibson Place
Yes.
area. So we basically bulldoze the state houses that are no longer fit for purpose.
Yeah.
A
A lot of which are already empty, aren't they?
We rebuild brand new state houses,
Yeah.
but we build private rentals and homes for first home buyers in the same area.
Yes, so you've got a mixture.
Yeah, I've always believed, no matter what government is in power, whether it's red or blue, just building state houses together is neglect. And to be brutally honest, you just look out at some of the areas in Hamilton and you see the neglect.
Well, anyone who's old enough to remember Shakespeare Ave about 30 years ago will understand what you're talking about.
Well, just Jepson Place, for example.
Yeah.
That's going to be changed.
Yeah.
And that's through special housing areas, a special housing area.
Because you're probably barely old enough to remember the original Shakespeare Ave.
Yes.
Yeah, that was an area you didn't
Yeah.
choose to walk
So
through.
I always use this for an example. So there's, on Jepson Place, there was an older lady living by herself in a 5-bedroom state house. It was no longer fit for purpose. So that section will be bulldozed. We build a brand new 1-bedroom state house for her that's warm, dry and healthy.
Yeah.
And either Housing New Zealand builds more state housing on the existing land, or they could sell it to private developers to build private rentals and homes for first home buyers.
Because this also works in with what another candidate was talking about, about part of the development in areas has to be towards security. So the planning needs to incorporate measures to create better security, be that lighting, trees, and in this case what you bring up there is about the mixture of housing.
Yep.
Because if you do a mixture of housing, you don't get one segment of society taking over an area and it getting run down. The balance causes a level of, I suppose, responsibility for everyone in the neighbourhood to keep looking after their neighbourhood.
Yeah, so more in the give incentives to developers to build in the CBD and on old state housing land, but also around the university, as a lot of people can see, they're bulldozing the houses and they're putting apartments up.
Yeah.
That's great. That's fantastic.
Well,
so
because most of their tenants are going to be university students, to be honest. And instead of having 5 or 6 students living in a house part of the year, having apartments like that make it easier for students. Because some students then have to shift at the end of the year to go and find somewhere else because the rest of their flatmates are leaving and they've got to shift.
Yeah. So if developers can show that they can take a 5-bedroom house, knock it down, and show that they can increase the supply of housing on existing land, then they should council should give them an incentive to do it, and do it fast.
And there are a number of ways they can do those incentives that we don't need to go into because they just take ages. But there are a number of ways they can give incentives like that with conditions attached to them to ensure that it goes the way it's supposed to go. And
the benefit of university students living closely in the long term, they won't need a car. In the short term, they will. But if they live closer to university, they won't need to drive to their class.
And if we look after the public transport system and through a denser population, we can then justify beefing up the public transport system to better suit people. Yes, it's not discouraging. I'm not saying to people you can't own a car. People can still own cars if they want to.
Yeah, it's about choice.
But look at how many people even now choose not to own a car because of the inconvenience and the fact that they literally do not need it.
Like, I would use public transport more if it was cheaper and if it got me very close to my work. But at the moment it doesn't.
Yeah.
So I use my car to go.
My father used public transport a lot because he was right on the Orbiters route, and most of the places he was going to were a university occasionally for some lectures, the hospital, or chapel. Right. and all of that was on the Orbiter route, and the Orbiter left from across the road from it. So,
that is convenient.
yeah, and it was convenient sometimes when I'd be coming from somewhere, going to his place, and I wasn't riding. I'd just jump on the Orbiter and just follow around till it gets to. Now, talking about transport, something else I've got to bring up, and won't mention names, but it feeds right into one of the things you've spoken about quite a few times, and that's disability parking. I know a lot of drivers think it's an inconvenience because until they are in a situation of needing it, and that's not just disability as in a wheelchair, it also is age-related disabilities as well. Because I remember my father, he had a card to be able to use them. He always used to try and not use them if there was some alternative option nearby. You'd only use the handicap parking as a last resort. And we recently, it's popped up in social media about one sitting councillor who's also running for election who parked in a handicap zone. And this was after only a few weeks beforehand speaking about how she stood up to demand more disability parking spaces and parking spaces for mothers with prams and all this sort of thing. Which makes you lose a bit of confidence in someone when they do these things, especially when they're aware. It's not like you can't really claim that you weren't aware that you shouldn't have parked there. And so it's not accidental. You deliberately parked there when you knew otherwise. More so if you're a sitting councillor, you know the regulations.
So I want to focus on my policy. So at the moment, you pay if you get caught, you pay $150 fee.
Okay.
So my opinion is you ping them and raise it to $500. It's not going to be the silver bullet, but I've also announced that 3 strikes and you're out, and already I'm getting feedback and saying that's too soft. So breaking news.
Yeah.
I'm announcing that instantly you'll get a $500 fine.
Yep.
And your car will get towed.
Okay.
Right there and then. We need to get hard on the people, and it's not just someone in the last few days. It's a lot of people.
It's been happening for ages. I used to sit before the CAF changed hands and their standard coffee went down. I used to sit at a CAF that was 20 metres from a handicap parking zone, and the number of times I saw cars not just park there but rotate through there, right? And I'd ring council, and this is the other thing, is if you're going to have a system like that, council need to be more proactive about taking action. Because I remember I had lunch with a couple of different people in a row, so I sat in that spot for almost 2 hours, 6 different cars parked there. Most of them, one or two were only like 10 or so minutes. The rest were all 15-ish minutes, more or less. Each one of those I rang the council on, and in 2 hours, not a single parking warden turned up. Yet there was parking wardens just round the corner.
Okay, so there is an app now you can download, and you can take a picture of their number plate, and through that process they'll be called out, and I'm pretty sure that then goes to the Hamilton City Council. And then
but whether or not they do anything with it, because I've sent the council photographs of cars parked, and as far as I know, nothing's ever been done about it, because I actually have got a piece on social media where I post people parking like idiots. And it tends to be getting a large number of handicaps parking.
So I'm always open, because if I want to get this through, I have to work with whoever's elected in council. So it's not a promise, it's something I'll work hard on advocating.
Yeah, I think it's something that you would probably find quite a bit of support for in council, because I think most people a more understanding of the necessity of those parking spots. Right?
Yeah.
That's right. We're sitting here at a CAF, right beside a loading zone with 3 cars parked in it. Neither of them are actually fulfilling the requirements of parking in the loading zone. I think lack of enforcement has meant people have just got very slack with following the rules.
I actually feel sorry for the wardens too.
Yeah.
Because if they get an over-aggressive person, they have to deal with it.
Yeah. It's
So
not.
it's
It's not an
important
easy
that
job.
we hold parking wardens to account, but we also support them when something like that happens.
Yeah.
We'll stay on accessibility and footpaths. They're a core service, and we just have to walk
And that
around.
completely hit and miss as to the quality of them sometimes.
We just have to walk around the city, and they're just an utter disgrace. They're a core service. It's good that they've started to have investment in the 10-year plan, but not enough. So
Yeah.
that's something that I'll advocate for too.
Have you ever had a chance to be in an electric wheelchair and go around some of our footpaths?
No, but I pushed children and adults in wheelchairs. So
Okay.
I see it from.
I've done that once, and I ride a bike on the road, and being on a wheelchair on some roads, especially over on Peach Grove and some places like that, scared the bejesus out of me.
It's also important that we need to review how footpaths get fixed, because if you contact the councillor, they'll contact the person who's in charge of footpaths, and they'll get that footpath to the top of the ladder. Okay, I don't like that system, because the people underneath have been waiting for a long time. And I think we just need to have a review and have a look to make changes to make sure the people that have been waiting a long time
Yeah.
get their footpaths fixed. And it's about funding.
Yeah.
It's about reallocating money to things that we, instead of the things that we want, we go to the things that we need.
I think another thing is also when a crowd like be it Spark or a plumbing outfit or whatever have to dig up a footpath to do something, lay some new pipes or whatever, I think the council could work as a intermediary to communicate to all the other people that have got something in the ground under there. If you want to do some maintenance, do it now while it's open. Work with the crowd that's opened it up and do something now so that you're not, because I've seen a number of situations where a pavement's been dug up, a patch of asphalt's been put down afterwards, and then a week later it's been dug up again by a different crowd for a different reason, and it seems a bit of a...
And who's paying for that?
Yeah, and so it's a waste of money and a waste of resources.
It's also important the kind of trees that council plant.
Yes.
Now, I'm not an expert on trees, but I have talked to residents that have been overseas that have seen trees growing that don't lift up the footpaths every few years.
Yeah.
Now, if we have to pay more money up front, it's more efficient to pay more money for decent trees, or we could just talk to the residents and go, do you want trees? Because a lot of the residents I'm talking to, they have to clean up the leaves, they block up the drains.
Yeah.
So if we can have trees that don't have huge amount of leaves, don't lift up the footpaths, we could even look at fruit trees, like lemon trees, and anyone can pick them and take them.
Yeah, I've heard that happens in a few places overseas where, yes, the council take responsibility for cleaning up any mess that's left behind, but they plant fruit trees. Fruit trees that are likely to be used by a lot of people, oranges, lemons, apples, this sort of thing, and they maintain them, and you can help yourself. And I think that's quite a good idea. Yeah, we already do it with. We're sitting here, and right across from us is a traffic island, which has got a type of silver beet growing in it, which is actually harvested for the zoo. Right?
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Oh, didn't you? Okay, that when you see these growing around with this what looks like this coloured silver beet, that's actually being when that's harvested, it's actually taken up to the zoo for the animals.
Yeah. And I've heard that it's good fertilizer too.
Oh yeah.
I'm not an expert, so
Any green matter like that, is good. It regenerates the ground as well for when they go back to planting just flowers, because it's something that grows in the colder months, whereas the flowers tend to come out for things like summer and spring and Anzac Day and all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's just good use of the ground. But with trees, there's a few trees that have taught council a lesson or two in some places. Frankton had quite a rash in there for a while, which were ripping up big chunks of roading in Commerce Street or one of those. Yeah. Somewhere there. I just can't remember exactly where it was, but yeah. So, you enjoying the race?
Oh, it's tiring.
Tiring.
Just fitting everything in. Like, I've knocked on 4,000 doors. I've, working 30 to 40 hours a week, going to the candidate meetings and delivering 10,000 flyers. It's tiring, but when you knock on someone's door and they say, yes, I support you, you're going to get my vote, it gives me more motivation to keep on knocking.
And regardless of the outcome, you can honestly say you've given it your best go, can't you?
Yes. At the end of the day, it's up to the voters.
Yeah. One thing I found interesting that was brought up, one of the candidates mentioned in their social media, which I found quite interesting, was the concept that we, especially for mayor, we need a mayor, but also councillors, that are going to treat that as their one and only job. Because a lot of people think, before they get into this, that they can do two jobs, do big councillor part-time. Until they start doing it, and if they really want to be their best as councillor, they can't really be splitting their time. Because, and I know this from watching my mother do it as a councillor. The only thing is, her part-time job was being mother, and she gave us most of that. Most of the house came to me and my sister to do watches on council. But it was fun. But the amount of
skills.
Yeah, we griped about it for about the first month, and then we sort of adjusted and realised, well, we should have been doing this anyway, so get off our lazy asses and do stuff, But it was quite intriguing how much reading she had to do. There were day trips to go on site to look at things and all these sorts of things. There is no, and that's just a tiny little country town. There's no way you could do that part-time if you were doing it properly.
So it'll be full-time for council, but if I would like to work maybe 5 to 10 hours a fortnight in the job I'm currently in.
Okay.
I think
keep you
it'll
grounded.
keep me grounded back to life. But because I'll be in a casual position, I can say this week I don't want to work.
Too many meetings and because my view, and I'd like to hear what you say about this. My view is that if you're a councillor, that is your job, and you should be treating that like any other job you do, and that's turning up to work every day, attending all the meetings, etc., and except for obviously illness and things like that. But in a normal 40-hour-a-week job, can you get away with going, I'm not available today, I'm not going to turn up to this meeting, or
No, so
you don't get to do that, do you?
Council will be priority.
Yeah. And this is what this other candidate was mentioning, is how we need to, as voters, we need to be looking at that aspect as well. Who do you feel confident's going to actually treat it as a job? Because effectively, if you got elected, it'd be good to see you get elected. If you got elected, that is your job for 3 years.
Yep.
It's just that you have to, it's like having a 3-year contract. In 3 years, you have to reapply.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, it's up to the voters at the end of the day.
Yeah. And they're the board of directors that get to interview you and choose whether you.
If I have, I'm an outsider at the moment, so I need the voting turnout to increase. 31.7% in the West Ward 2016. That's just,
Woeful.
it's sad. It's sad. And it's very challenging when I knock on a door and they say, sorry, I'm not interested, my vote won't matter. It's very challenging trying to convince them. So I'm like, I need people like you to vote. Otherwise, we'll have the same councillors that obviously they aren't happy with. But if 68% of people
Don't vote.
voted,
No,
if they
voted.
did,
Yeah.
then we would have different representation around the council table.
Yeah, because democracy works best when everyone participates. Now, I've asked this a couple of other candidates. Do you think we need to bring back some form of education in schools to do with civics education, democracy, understanding the responsibilities of voting, what our voting system is? So
Oh, definitely civics education, but the council can't force schools to do it, so it
No.
has to come from central government. But what I would like
but
to see...
I think councils could actually play a good role in
So
providing the assistance.
So I have an idea, and it would be up to the CEO and whoever's elected to invite schools in,
Yeah.
to have a tour around the council building, come to a council meeting, and then after having a Q&A with current councillors.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the silver bullet, but I think it's a good step in the same direction.
Yeah.
And I'll always invite I'll always ask schools if they would like to have a counsellor, and I'll be happy to go and talk to students.
Because we do have a democracy department who could do a rotating lecture every now and again at different schools about these issues, and the school could then develop it from there, or work with council to develop it from there.
And it'll be up to the current councillors who are elected whether they want to participate in a Q&A.
Yeah.
And if they really care about getting more people out to vote, especially a younger generation, you'll see who turns up and who doesn't.
Yeah. I also suggested an idea to, I'll lose track of who I've interviewed now. One of them anyway. What are you lot? I suggested the idea of possibly next election, because it could have been happening now, run a parallel pretend election. So in other words, you allow, 16-year-olds and upwards that can't vote to actually, you have a whole vote system. They can vote, right? And they can take part in voting for who they want. It's not counted towards the actual election, but it's treated as a separate set of figures. And two things, it would get them used to the idea of investigating who to vote for, but it would be interesting to compare the voting statistics of a bunch of 16, 17-year-olds versus the rest of the population that are actually shaping the council. It'd be interesting to compare those figures and see if there is a big gap between what young people want and what...
I think that's a good idea, and I think the best way to do that is every individual school making a choice to do that. Council shouldn't force schools to do it,
No.
but I think it would be great if Board of Trustees decide to do that every few years, even do it in a non-election.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good idea.
Do you think as a council, the council needs to look at the possibility of playing more of a role in being the instigator or being there to help groups, be it voluntary groups, be it schools, to do new things that can help bring out ideas, participation, all this sort of thing. So the council don't necessarily force it, they are just there to, as enablers, to enable these things to happen by providing skilled people to...
I think that's up to each and every individual councillor.
Yeah.
And if there's like a team of councillors that want to do it together, then that's great.
Because the council has a lot of resources. You look at the people who deal with the parks, for instance, as in the trees and that, not the playgrounds, right? There's people there that can if the schools want them to, can talk to kids about the importance of our parks and recreational spaces. There's the democracy unit. There's all these other parts to council that can play a part in communicating back to the public.
What I would like to see is it not to happen in an election year. So I like your idea of getting the 16 and 17-year-olds. So if I'm elected, keep me hold to that. But doing it in a non-election year, I want councillors to get out in the community every single bloody day, not just 3 months before an election. Be active on social media and engage with these young people. It's up to councillors.
It would be so
to
nice
do that.
to see councillors do more of that.
There are councillors that do social media all the time. They are out in the community. Then there's some that are not.
No. And I must admit, part of my decision-making process for the election, and I will never tell anyone who I'm voting for, because I don't make that decision until I've done as many of these interviews and been to as many of the debates as I can. But part of my decision-making process for this term is going to be how much participation a candidate is having in the real world with people. Now, see, you're doing a lot of door knocking. I can create a list of people that are actually participating quite well in interacting with people.
Yeah. At the same time, just my personal view, I don't like going to events just because I'm standing for council. And I'm seeing a lot of candidates do that, which is fair. It's just I don't want to go around trying to look good, helping out with all these community organisations just because I want to get noticed and get name recognition. I want to do that when I'm an actual councillor.
Yeah. And that's the thing I notice. I got my own list of current candidates who were also councillors who I have seen turn up at different events. And the same goes for central government politicians. Like there's that cluster that because I'm at so many things taking photographs, I notice certain ones when they turn up at these events, and I make a mental note. Okay, I've seen you. And they're just the inverse of that is there's ones I haven't seen at certain events. And over a 3-year period of time, if I haven't seen you at a single event, I may not have been to the events you did go to, but you must be going to a pretty small quantity of number of
I think
events.
our central government MPs in Hamilton do a good job. Tim, David and Jamie, they get around as much as they can.
Yeah. Well, Tim does a very good job of encouraging democracy by having his Meet the Candidates meetings.
Yep.
And he's got another one on the 27th of September. That's the
Next
mayoral
Friday, I
one.
think.
Oh, we're already that far through the month.
It's the 20th on Friday. Voting papers get delivered.
Bugger! I've
I'm
only
so
just
excited.
adjusted. I've only just adjusted to the beginning of September.
It's the 17th of September, so we're already halfway through.
Yeah. So, well, thanks very much for your time, and good luck in the election.
Yeah, and
Do you have a
I'd
final
actually
word?
like to say thank you to Lance. You see all my photos around? Lance took them for me. Voting papers get delivered from Friday the 20th. Vote small, think big.
So feel free to comment under this video if you think you make a good model.